But what is scary is you can have astrocytoma. You can have tumors of these guys. If you have millions of those, it is just spider webbed all throughout that brain when you look at a CT scan. So that's a big deal. That type of brain tumor you don't want because it's rampant throughout that brain. And usually they don't live very long. Okay. So again, they're allowing things in and out, and they're the other things that protect us from bacteria, getting to the brain. But there are, like I said, there are things that can get past this guy. We talked about, you've heard of meningitis. That's one that can cross that blood-brain barrier. So these guys are found wrapped around the spinal cord, the vessels of the spinal cord, and the brain, protecting us. So the most numerous of all glial cells, I don't think I mentioned that to you, but your astrocytes, they are. We've got tons of them, millions of them, protecting our brain and our spinal cord. Your astrocytes. Oh, it's the most numerous of all glial cells. And this will be on your PowerPoint. You don't have to write every single thing down. It'll be on your PowerPoint. But astrocytes, they are. Making that blood-brain barrier. Okay, so we talked about neuroglia. Neurons are the big guys. They're the main thing that's going on in our nervous system because they're conducting impulses. They're bringing information to the spinal cord in the brain, or they're relaying that information that the brain has decided down to a muscle or a gland. So sensory, afferent, ascending neurons, they're detecting a stimulus, the temperature in the room. They're picking up that stimulus and sending it to the brain. And inside the brain or spinal cord, you have what are called interneurons. These are the guys that, because your sensory or afferent neurons speak one language, where your motor neurons, efferent, speak another. So they don't speak the same language. They wouldn't understand each other if they were to talk or speak to each other. So one's speaking Spanish and one's speaking English, and they don't know what each other is saying. So you have an interpreter, and that's your interneuron. So he's sitting in the brain, and he's saying, oh, okay, sensory says it's cold in the room. Turns to motor neuron and says, hey, why don't you start shaking because we're cold? And so then the muscles start to contract and shake. So let's look at a neuron, what a neuron actually looks like. This is a cell, just like a red blood cell, which red blood cells don't have a nucleus, or say a skin cell. But this is the cells of the nervous system, and this is one structure of it. And this is the one you'll be tested over, because there are different ways that some of the neurons look. So first you have on the outer, this kind of looks like hair, is your dendrites. They're the ones that are picking up whatever information it is and sending it down. So the impulse always goes in this direction. So it'll hit these dendrites first, shoot that impulse to the cell body, or the soma. It's also called the soma. So the cell body, where we have our nucleus, then the impulse will travel down what's called its axon. So its little tail, its axon. It'll travel down this way. And we'll talk about some of the different parts of it in a bit. Then it will end here at the synaptic knob. So the very end plate here, we've got little knobbies, kind of look like little feet at the end of this axon. So the whole thing is called an axon terminal. And at the very end, you have knobs called synaptic knobs. In a minute, we'll talk about a synapse. We've talked about a synapse before when we talked about muscle contraction. So that's not going to be new to you. So, going back, we have here, we're looking at the myelin sheath itself. The myelin sheath wraps around this axon tail, and this is in the central and the peripheral nervous system. We have these myelin sheaths. And I like to think of them kind of like, because when you think of neurons, think of nerve impulses or electricity. So I like to think of the myelin sheath of like electrical tape, plastic electrical tape, wrapped around this wire. Because if you had, and because you have millions upon millions of these neurons, and if their axons are all touching each other and overlapping each other, then they would short circuit. So you have these guys protecting them or insulating them from the other guys. So that's what they're for. And my hair did it. So there is a difference between the myelin sheath when it's in the peripheral nervous system, so out here, or if it's in the central nervous system. And remember what cells are making that. So central, we have those oligodendrocytes, but in the peripheral, we have Schwann cells. So central nervous system, we have oligodendrocytes making that myelin sheath, no big deal. But the difference here, in the peripheral nervous system, the myelin sheath is made, but then there's one little extra thing that is created with this myelin sheath, unlike this one. You have what's called a neurolema. It's a membrane. It's an outer membrane that is then wrapped around that electrical tape, an extra insulation. What's such a big deal about that is if I was to sever my finger and they were able to save it and reattach it, I could get movement and even feeling back in my finger. But if I was to sever my spinal cord, say from waist down, could I get movement and feeling of my legs? No. And the problem is because central nervous system, I don't have a myelin sheath. So here, when I sever and then you reconnect everything, what will happen is in the peripheral nervous system, what will happen is these, if I was to sever here, you'll have these dendrites of one end, or axon terminals. The dendrites of this one, say there's another one up here and it was severed, it will overreach and it can burrow down inside that neurolema. It gives it an anchoring spot to reattach. So it's like it's got some type of mesh or something that it can cling to and reconnect. Central nervous system doesn't have that, so they can't reconnect. Because we don't reconnect them. We don't take these neurons and reconnect them. We can't sew them together. They're tiny, tiny, tiny. They're cells. But in the peripheral nervous system, they can reconnect themselves and grab on and hang on and pull themselves together and fuse back together where they can't hear. So that's why they're trying to take Schwann cells and do things, trying to create that in the central nervous system. Which neurons detect sensation? So ascending, taking information up. What was that? It's afferent. Ascending, so A for afferent, it takes information up to the central nervous system. That's the neurons that do that. Efferent is going up or down? Down. And who of all these is the interpreter? The interneurons. They're talking. They're interpreting what is being said.